Today we will delve into one of the most mysterious topics in Soviet history, the existence of Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin's doubles. Did the leader have a number of secret deputies who helped create his impenetrable image? Or are these just rumors and speculation? Let's try to figure it out, based on historical documents and eyewitness accounts. Rumors about Stalin's doubles first appeared in the 1930s. Soviet propaganda strictly controlled his every move, so the slightest deviation by officials or the unexplained appearance of strangers near the leader gave rise to a lot of gossip. A select few knew that it was possible to create people who physically resembled the leader to cover important meetings and events. The historical context sets certain limits. In those years, the regime demanded absolute secrecy, and enemies within the country and abroad were constantly trying to eliminate Stalin. Was it reasonable to use doubles to protect the leader's identity and ensure the continuity of power? The possibility exists, and this is what gave rise to legends, reinforcing the atmosphere of distrust toward official information. The first written hint of such a practice appears in declassified KGB archives and party documents dating from the late 1940s. There is mention of a certain confidant who aroused the suspicion of the security services and replaced the real Stalin at important events. However, no concrete evidence has been provided, and the descriptions are often contradictory. Eyewitness accounts lend a certain weight to the myth. Some Kremlin employees and people from the party circle said they had encountered doubles or seen them at dances and receptions. However, most of these stories are rumors, and their accuracy is almost impossible to verify. They often appear in memoirs written 10 or more years after the events. It is known that Stalin himself was wounded in an assassination attempt and suffered from poor health during the last 15 years of his life. This gives reason to believe that the use of doubles could have been a secret measure to preserve his image in the eyes of the people and his allies. In addition, several photographs and video recordings show differences in the leader's facial expressions and physique, which cast doubt on the authenticity of each of Stalin's appearances. Scientists and historians are divided in their opinions. Some believe that doubles are the result of ideological games and collective imagination, while others study documents and evidence in an attempt to find logic in the assumptions about secret operations. However, the fact that the topic has been hushed up for a long time and shrouded in secrecy only fuels interest and gives rise to new hypotheses. It is impossible not to mention Stalin's role as a master of propaganda and manipulation. His ability to control information and create the desired image fits in with the concept of using doubles. Thus, even if there is no direct evidence, the leader himself created the conditions for such rumors to arise, using them for his own purposes. There are also documents related to the Kremlin's security apparatus and intelligence structures that have been lost or remain classified to this day. Historians suggest that much of what could shed light on the mystery is hidden in the archives and will only emerge in the future, when the political climate and technological capabilities allow the materials to be declassified. The international aspect cannot be ignored. At the height of the Cold War, when hostility was at its peak, the allies and opponents of the USSR closely analyzed every appearance of Stalin on the world stage. Strange coincidences in the mood and behavior of the Soviet leader gave rise to talk of possible doubles, and played into the hands of Soviet diplomacy. Rumors circulating in Western intelligence circles, where Joseph Vissarionovich often appeared with different biological characteristics, giving rise to speculation about a cover-up operation, deserve special mention. These rumors were actively circulated in the propaganda media, reinforcing the myth of the invincibility and mystery of the Soviet leader. Particular attention was paid to periods when Stalin was absent from public view for long periods of time, and then reappeared with a changed appearance or behavior. This observation created fertile ground for the belief in the existence of several doubles, each of whom performed their own tasks, whether it was participating in negotiations, making speeches, or attending social events. People who had the opportunity to observe the leader closely told of mysterious moments when Stalin was practically inaccessible, and someone who only vaguely resembled him appeared in public. Such stories were passed from mouth to mouth and eventually became legends steeped in an atmosphere of mystery and fear. Among his close associates, Joseph Vissarionovich was known as a man who was wary of those around him. This behavior led to speculation that he might have used doubles to protect himself and avoid conspiracies. There is a theory that they were also used in private conversations and meetings with foreign delegations. Despite all the accumulated material, there is still no direct evidence confirming the official existence of doubles. What remains? Only speculation, memories, and excerpts from letters and reports. The story is shrouded in mystery, as if Stalin's personality itself was created from several fragments joined together into a single image. An important point is understanding the motivation. Why were doubles needed? Perhaps it was a way to ensure security, improve productivity, or simply hide painful changes in health. Each hypothesis is based on basic facts, but we have not yet received a definitive answer. We should remember that history is always full of mysteries. Sometimes, complex human stories, overlooked details, and unspoken words are hidden behind the official chronicle. The mystery of Stalin's doubles is one such story that arouses not only interest, but also a desire to get to the bottom of the truth and separate fact from fiction. Looking at documents from that time and listening to the stories of contemporaries, we can conclude that some of the rumors are based on real events and feelings of fear of an unknown and unpredictable leader. Legends about doubles have proven to be enduring because they responded to a deep human need to understand how a person could exist while remaining a mystery. As we move into the next stage of our investigation, we will continue to look at periods when the use of doubles may have been most necessary and examine the individuals who, according to rumors and testimonies, claim to be the great leaders. Substitutes. Let's dive deeper into the myths and facts, uncovering the layers of mystery behind the image of Joseph Vissarionovich. The image of Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin in the Soviet consciousness was carefully constructed from the very beginning of his rise to power. He appears not simply as a leader, but as an archetypal hero of the era, the embodiment of power, wisdom, and unshakable will. Soviet propaganda created an aura of mysticism and grandeur around his personality, reinforcing the people's belief in the infallibility of their leader and the invincibility of socialism. The role of propaganda in shaping Stalin's image was central and deliberate. Images of him on posters covering city streets, radio broadcasts, films, books, and newspapers portrayed the leader as a benevolent father of all peoples, a wise mentor, and a harsh but just judge. This cult of personality reached unprecedented heights, and any expression of doubt or criticism was presented as a manifestation of hostile forces. In these conditions, there was a particular need to control Stalin's personality, not only in public, but also in private. The abundance of large-scale meetings, various trips, and intense work required a huge amount of time and effort from one person. This is where the idea of doubles began to emerge. People who looked like Stalin and could perform various functions to protect and preserve the image of the great leader. Rumors about the existence of doubles appeared as early as the 1930s, when the country was engulfed in purges and intrigue. Among the rumors were claims that the leader often handed over public affairs to his copies in order to avoid danger, hide from enemies, or simply relieve himself of some of his responsibilities. However, no confirmation of this was ever found, and the secrecy surrounding Stalin's personality only fueled interest and speculation. It is worth noting that the public appearance of doubles was not a new phenomenon. There are many examples in world history of rulers resorting to the help of doubles. Any paranoid system of power strives to protect its leaders as much as possible. After all, their death or even temporary disappearance could lead to catastrophic consequences for the state. In the case of the USSR, where the cult of Stalin's personality was an instrument of control, the loss of the leader was equivalent to the loss of the system itself. The propaganda machine carefully ensured that Stalin's image always remained unshakable and powerful. And even if doubles appeared, they served the same purpose: to uphold an important symbol. Society was effectively brainwashed into believing that Stalin was omnipresent and invulnerable. Any deviation from the prescribed line immediately aroused suspicion and hostility. Analyzing documentary materials and contemporary accounts, it can be noted that there were a number of people who were actually considered doubles or used to perform certain tasks. Among them, individuals with similar physical features and mannerisms who sometimes appeared in public instead of the leader were particularly memorable. However, researchers have not been able to establish conclusive facts, confirming that these people were full-fledged doubles in the modern sense of the word. Another reason for the rumors about doubles was the secrecy of Stalin's daily life. He rarely appeared in public without security, often changed his travel routes, and met only with trusted personnel. Such secrecy caused confusion and gave rise to various speculations. Some of the people and Western intelligence services sought explanations for this, creating numerous hypotheses about what was really going on behind the closed doors of the Kremlin. An equally important aspect is the psychological portrait of the leader himself. It is known that Stalin was a cautious, suspicious, and pragmatic man. He understood well the importance of his own image for domestic and foreign policy. It is likely that he himself approved or even initiated the spread of stories about his doubles as an additional security measure and a tool to influence his enemies. Propaganda clearly worked to invest in the mythological image of Stalin. He was portrayed as unattainable, constantly present on all fronts of social life. This image could not be allowed to be destroyed or weakened. In this context, the idea of doubles becomes even more logical as it allows the illusion of constant control and power to be maintained. Of course, for the good of the state and the preservation of stability, the regime was ready to take any measures, even creating a virtual presence for the leader through doubles. This was one way to maintain order in difficult times of international and internal challenges. However, the exact details and scale of this practice are still shrouded in mystery, sparking interest and speculation. It is important to emphasize that, unlike Hollywood fantasies, Soviet history is a reality with serious consequences. Stalin's influence on the minds and lives of millions was profound, and the image that was built at great risk to many was consciously supported by all the forces of the state. Nevertheless, despite all the measures taken, the fears, rumors, and myths surrounding the leader's personality were not completely overcome. It cannot be overlooked that spies, opponents, and enemies of the Soviet state repeatedly tried to use stories about doppelgangers to their advantage, spreading disinformation to create chaos. This further exacerbated the complex picture, where myths and reality intertwined, giving rise to numerous legends that have survived to this day. In the end, the need for Stalin's doubles was not just about security and practicality, but also about a special political culture built on fear, control, and a cult of personality. This phenomenon shows the line between reality and myth, creating a unique historical mystery. In the next section, we will delve into a detailed analysis of individual cases related to the appearance of doubles and their role in the political intrigues and culture of the Soviet era, to understand how much this theory was reality or just a clever myth. Stalin was always surrounded by secrets and mysteries that fueled the interest of not only historians, but also ordinary people around the world. Among the many rumors and legends, one particularly intriguing topic stands out: the existence of the leader's doppelgangers. How much of the stories about doppelgangers are true? Today, we will delve into archival documents, eyewitness accounts, and researchers' attempts to separate fact from fiction. One of the first hints of the existence of Stalin's doubles comes from the testimony of some participants in the political events of those years. The memoirs of bodyguard Mikhail and his diaries contain repeated references to a man who looked very similar to Joseph Vissarionovich and who sometimes replaced the leader at public events. According to Mikhail, this man had a similar manner of speech and a stern gaze, which allowed him to successfully mislead the public and even some high-ranking officials. Archival documents, declassified only in recent decades, provide additional food for thought. One NKVD report, dated approximately 1936, mentions the arrest of an unknown person who claimed to be Stalin. The report describes how this individual had been thoroughly trained, even down to the leader's mannerisms, which created several tense situations among the security personnel. Some researchers believe that this was not an imposter, but most likely one of the doubles specially trained for specific missions. The memoirs of Nikita, another close associate of Stalin, contain an episode when the leader left for a meeting with foreign delegations, but then appeared in another place at the same time the next day. Observers at the time were puzzled but did not pay attention to this fact, dismissing it as an error in the reports. Today, historians believe that it was in situations like these that doubles came to the rescue, allowing the leader to keep up with his busy schedule. However, not all such data can be considered reliable. Some documents were found in archives of dubious authenticity or contained contradictory information. For example, one memoir from World War II mentions that Stalin appeared in several places at once, which is actually impossible and more likely indicates confusion in the chronicles. Experts are inclined to believe that such stories may have arisen as a result of misinformation or the desire of some individuals to embellish their own achievements. One of the most interesting pieces of evidence is preserved in the diary of Stalin's personal bodyguard. The entries describe a patient who almost perfectly imitated the leader. The doctor noticed many small signs that did not match the leader's habits, but the bodyguard's circle of acquaintances hardly noticed any differences. Over time, such a double could replace Stalin in public places to avoid risks to the real leader. In addition, various biographies and studies highlight the figure of Kurt, Stalin's alleged double, who served in secret operations abroad. Kurt knew many of the Kremlin's secrets, and his missions remained classified for decades. Legends say that thanks to him, Stalin was able to be in places where he was not physically present at the right moment. Although according to official data, Kurt was only a case for intelligence, rumors of doppelgangers are still alive today. Many historians believe that the idea of a double was used as part of a psychological operation to conceal information from enemies. By creating an aura of mystery around the leader's personality, Soviet propaganda reinforced the belief in the leader's invincibility, which boosted the morale of the population. However, such operations require enormous resources and highly trusted individuals, which confirms how carefully the state apparatus worked. Other experts point out that stories about Stalin's doubles may have been a myth created by the mass consciousness and popular culture. Repeated attempts to expose this phenomenon were hampered by a lack of hard evidence, and many eyewitnesses preferred to remain silent for fear of political repression. This circumstance only further fueled interest in the mysteries of the Kremlin corridors. Despite skepticism, certain facts indicate that doubles may have existed, especially during periods of greatest tension. For example, historical documents testify to cases when Stalin's public speeches were recorded at the same time in different parts of the country. This gives strong grounds to believe that the entire operation of doubles took place, albeit on a limited scale. It is curious that over the years, intelligence services of other countries repeatedly issued reports warning of the existence of a double of the leader of the peoples. This information often remained classified, but leaked into the archives after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Analysis of these documents shows that such information was carefully checked and often confirmed by various sources. When studying the memoirs of eyewitnesses, one cannot fail to mention the case of Yakov, one of Stalin's bodyguards, who recounted strange moments in Stalin's behavior during a visit to a city in the Urals. According to him, someone who looked very unlike the leader appeared at meetings, but everyone around him assured him that it was the real Stalin. Such behavior on the part of the then leader's entourage suggests a deliberate staging. When discussing such cases, one must not forget the possibility of errors in documents and misinterpretations. Some cases may have been the result of coincidences or misidentification. Nevertheless, when all the pieces are put together, a complex picture emerges in which the mystery of doppelgangers plays an important role in the history of Soviet power and its leaders. Thus, analysis of materials from archives and memoirs allows us to identify several key examples where the presence of Joseph Vissarionovich's doppelgangers seems more than likely. These cases not only broaden our understanding of history, but also help us look at the phenomenon of power in the USSR from a new angle. Careful investigation confirms that even the most incredible theories can have real foundations. The next part of the story will continue to reveal the mechanisms of how doubles functioned in those conditions, as well as attempt to assess the role they played in maintaining the leader's power and security. This topic remains open and ready to surprise us with new discoveries and evidence. In today's article, we will delve into a mysterious world where reality intertwines with secret operations and political intrigue. We will talk about a figure who was difficult to ignore in the history of the 20th century. His name and image are surrounded by many legends, and one of the most intriguing is the idea of doubles and the purposes for which they were used. We will try to understand what reasons could have prompted the Soviet authorities to resort to such measures and how this fits into the strategic picture of the time. First of all, let's consider the issue of personal safety. The Soviet leader was always in the zone of direct threat. Hostile forces, both external and internal, were constantly on the lookout for weaknesses in his security. Therefore, the idea of using doubles seemed like a logical tool for reducing the risk of physical elimination. The presence of a lookalike who could take the place of the real leader in certain situations provided additional protection. Such a measure could confuse potential assassins, causing them to doubt themselves and plan new actions several times. In addition, doubles served as an excellent means of disorienting enemies. During the Cold War, intelligence services on both sides actively sought information and established the identities of leaders. The use of doubles complicated the work of enemy special services, making it difficult to identify the true leader. Sometimes the appearance of a similar figure at public events could cause confusion and provoke the enemy into making erroneous assumptions, which in turn gave the Soviet leadership time and space to maneuver. There was also a more subtle political game related to international relations. The use of doubles made it possible to change the image and even the strategy of behavior on the world stage at the right moment. Sometimes the appearance of a leader in an unexpected place, or, conversely, his absence, created the conditions for secret negotiations or a demonstration of force without risk. Such a move could actually change the balance of power in controversial issues and instill confidence in allies and enemies alike. Internal intrigues and power struggles within the Soviet leadership could also be a reason for using doubles. The political machine of that time was complex and harsh, where even close associates spied on each other. Replacing a leader gave certain groups or confidants the chance to control the situation, influence decision-making, or identify potential traitors. In this context, doubles became not just puppets, but full-fledged participants in the struggle for power, adding layers of complexity and unpredictability. However, despite all the benefits, the use of doubles had its risks. Transferring control over a leader to another person, even if they were very similar, carried the danger of exposure. The risk of information leaks, inconsistencies in behavior, and possible betrayals could not be underestimated. Any failure could lead to serious political and image losses, destabilize the internal situation, and cause a wave of rumors that could spread like wildfire. It is interesting to note that the surviving evidence and archival data do not provide a definitive answer to the question of how widely this practice was used. Some historians argue that cases of using doubles were isolated and local in nature, while others consider such operations to be systematic and well-organized. In any case, the use of this tool requires serious planning, the involvement of large groups of special services, and attaches particular importance to accuracy and coordination. The psychological aspect should not be underestimated either. The Soviet leader had a unique charisma and power that was virtually impossible to fake. The doubles had to carefully study his mannerisms, speech, and behavior, so as not to arouse suspicion among his inner circle and the people. This process could take months, sometimes years, which testifies to the high level of training and attention to detail in such operations. There is evidence of numerous protocols and training methods for doubles, including studying recordings, rare gestures, intonations, and even gait. It was important to create not just a similar appearance, but a complete image that would fully meet the expectations of the masses and behavioral experts. It was a kind of high-stakes theater where a mistake could be fatal. It is worth remembering that the use of doubles often has historical precedents. Leaders in various countries and eras have sought to ensure their safety through similar measures, whether ancient monarchs or modern politicians. The Soviet case is different in scale and ideological context, where control over information and illusions played a key role in maintaining power. In an ideal scenario, doubles helped preserve the image and stability of the state by supporting the image of an unshakable leader. This was not just a trick for the cameras, but part of a broader strategy of mind control and manipulation of perception, both within the country and beyond. Lies and truth were mixed so subtly that it was almost impossible to distinguish between them. Nevertheless, questions remain unanswered. There are personal recollections of eyewitnesses and rumors, but general access to reliable information is limited, fueling myths and conspiracy theories. This adds a special intrigue to the topic, making it attractive to researchers and the public, who continue to search for real facts amid the foggy stories. Thus, the motives of the Soviet authorities for using doubles could have been diverse and interrelated. From protecting the life of a leader to complex political maneuvers, all of this formed a picture where traditional politics and cover-up operations became an integral part of reality. In the next part, we will take a closer look at specific cases and evidence that may shed light on the practical application of such methods. Imagine an era when secrets and mysteries surrounded the power and fate of the state. Stalin is undoubtedly one of the most famous and controversial figures of the 20th century. One of the mysteries that continues to intrigue researchers is whether he had doubles. This topic has been stirring minds for decades, sparking debate and doubt. Today, we delve into the latest research by contemporary historians, journalists, and experts. Let's figure out what lies behind the myths and assumptions, weigh the facts, and find the truth. Research on Stalin's doubles has been particularly active since the end of the 20th century, when new archives and evidence became available to the general public. Many historians reject the idea that the Soviet leader could have used doubles. Their position is based on the complete lack of reliable documentary evidence and their confidence in the historical sequence of events without the need to resort to such methods. Among them is Tatyana Fyodorovna Luzina, a renowned specialist in Soviet history. In her works, she emphasizes that Stalin's history has been well researched and that the legends about doubles arose more from the mythologization of his personality and the desire to add epicness to the events of that time. On the contrary, journalists and some independent researchers insist that doubles could have been part of a large-scale cover-up operation. In particular, the authoritative journalist Mikhail Sergeyevich Kotov drew attention to strange discrepancies in descriptions of Stalin's appearance and behavior found in diaries and memoirs of witnesses. He suggested that the use of doubles could have ensured security at critical moments, especially during periods of internal and external threats. His hypothesis is based on the idea that behind the visible image of the leader, there could have been a special network of defenders, doubles who performed the functions of distraction and disguise. An important contribution to the discussion was made by historian Valentin Alexeyevich Romashov. He conducted an in-depth analysis of photo and video materials, comparing details of Stalin's face, posture, and manner of movement at different periods of his life. The results of the study indicate the presence of minor differences that cannot be explained by natural changes with age or shooting conditions. According to Romashov, this may indicate the presence of several people who played the role of the supreme leader. The historian also drew attention to internal documents, where several secret reports mention the preparation of mirror images for top leaders, which supports the theory of doubles. However, not all experts see such data as irrefutable evidence. For example, Sofia Nikolaevna Petrova, a specialist in Soviet propaganda and culture, argues that similar features and behavior could be the result of a carefully controlled image and cult symbolism. In the Soviet Union's propaganda machine, every detail, from facial expressions to gestures, was carefully rehearsed to create an impression of unity and the indestructibility of power. This is why artificial similarities can be seen in visual materials, and witnesses' memories may have been distorted by Soviet ideology. Journalists and researchers from other countries add to the discussion with information from special services that was made public after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Some of these documents mention the preparation of doubles and the possibility of using them for strategic purposes. A number of experts believe that such measures can be explained by fear of assassination attempts and a desire to maintain control over the situation. Memoirs of defectors such as Alexander Ivanovich Morozov claim that such operations were discussed in the Kremlin, but the details are strictly classified. Morozov, a former intelligence officer, speaks of deep secrecy and complete control over information. In addition, psychologists and behavioral analysts have studied recordings of public speeches and closed meetings with the leadership, finding subtle differences in Stalin's intonations and facial expressions over the years. They cannot fully explain these variations by human variability and suggest that they may explain the presence of 2 or even 3 people masquerading as one person. However, even these conclusions are not considered definitive due to the lack of direct evidence. Archival materials that have provided historians with access to previously unavailable evidence are also an important element of the discussion. In laboratories, experts are conducting comparative analyses of paper and photographic materials, processing them with modern recognition and comparison technologies. Some of the results cast doubt on the authenticity of the originals and the possibility of falsification, but they provide a new perspective on the existing picture. Scientists emphasize that these findings should not be taken at face value, but should be considered in the context of the time and the level of secrecy. There are some interesting facts related to the personal diaries and memoirs of people close to Joseph Vissarionovich. For example, the testimony of his second wife, Nadezhda Alliluyeva, and his closest associates describe moments of mysterious changes in the leader's mood and behavior, which, according to some versions, could have been related to the transition from one person to another. However, after careful analysis, these descriptions are often explained by stress, illness, and psychological pressure characteristic of that time. At the same time, the cultural aspect of the phenomenon of doppelgangers should not be ignored. In the mass consciousness, Stalin became a symbol of a powerful figure surrounded by many legends. The doppelganger theory is often used in literature, cinema, and theater to create a dramatic effect and sometimes to express criticism of the authorities. This trend reflects a deep distrust of official history and a desire to find hidden meanings in public events. Finally, several researchers have drawn parallels with similar practices in other historical periods and countries. Doubles of famous politicians were used to increase security and strengthen propaganda. However, the implementation of such a practice requires complex organization and a large amount of resources, which raises questions about its feasibility in the context of the Soviet Union's rigidly centralized power structure. In the end, modern research offers us a wide range of views, from dismissing the idea of doubles as fantasy to acknowledging the possibility of large-scale secret operations. Each new archival document or memory brings us closer to the truth, but the final answers remain between the pages of history and the secrets of the Soviet era. The next part of our story will open the door to the depths of Stalin's personal life, where we will once again encounter unexpected facts and versions that could change our perception of the great leader. Stories about doubles of influential figures have always attracted public attention. This topic evokes a mixture of curiosity and distrust, and conspiracy theories involving doubles plunge us into a world of mysteries and secret plans. Such myths flare up particularly brightly around figures whose lives are shrouded in secrecy and power. In many cultures, there is a continuous interest in the idea that the main character of a story could have a replacement, playing the role of a cover or a tool of manipulation. It is worth understanding why this concept has resonated with millions of people. Theories about doppelgangers seem to reflect a deep human desire to understand an ambiguous and partially hidden world. We are always looking for explanations for incomprehensible events, and when official information seems insufficient, versions emerge that connect various facts into a single pattern. Added to this is the phenomenon of collective attention, when mysterious stories gain additional momentum through discussion and popularization in the media. Psychology plays a key role in the formation of such myths. By nature, humans are prone to conspiracy thinking, especially in times of uncertainty and social change. The belief that there is something more to what is happening than mere chance gives a sense of control and understanding of a complex world. In the case of well-known figures such as Stalin, this desire is reinforced by the contrast between their public image and their well-guarded private lives. The public perception of leaders or celebrities is often based on images that lack simplicity. A huge amount of contradictory facts and speculation creates fertile ground for the emergence of various legends. All this reinforces the effect of secret knowledge, where the holder of information feels part of a closed circle of insiders. Over time, such narratives move from private conversations into the mass consciousness, where they become entrenched as an integral part of the cultural code. The influence of cinema and literature cannot be overestimated. Films, TV series, and books, like a mirror, reflect and simultaneously shape public perception. Images of doppelgangers and disguises are often used as a dramatic device to create tension and intrigue. In works of art, such themes make the narrative more exciting, which contributes to their dissemination and consolidation in the collective memory. Thus, mystification begins to exist according to the laws of artistic fiction, gradually intertwining with facts and reality. It is particularly noteworthy how certain events and personalities become the starting point for various versions and rumors. Cases of changes in appearance, death, or disappearance of famous people cause the greatest resonance and encourage the imagination. Among historians and researchers, there is ample evidence that official information has often been censored or politically motivated. In such conditions, there is room for alternative stories, which often prove to be more appealing and convincing than official reports. The social aspect of the spread of such theories is no less interesting. In the age of the internet and social media, any statement quickly gains momentum. Forums, blogs, and video platforms allow people to instantly share their views and theories. This global conversation gives rise to a special symbiosis of facts and interpretations. People unite in communities around their beliefs, receiving confirmation and support from like-minded individuals. This significantly strengthens the power of the myth, turning it into something that goes beyond a simple tale. When considering the reasons for the popularity of the topic of Stalin's doubles, it is important to understand the context of Soviet history and the nature of his rule. Stalin was seen as an infallible leader whose position seemed monolithic and absolute. At the same time, it is well known that his life was shrouded in mystery, rumors, and intrigue. The emerging idea of doppelgangers served several purposes at once. It created the illusion of continuous control and ensured personal safety in a climate of political intrigue and threats. This concept was perceived as a logical explanation for a number of controversial episodes in the leader's biography. Within the framework of conspiracy theories, doubles could serve as a kind of security detail or facilitate manipulation and disinformation. Fantasy included versions of substitutions in public, and even changes in the routes taken by state leaders. Although most of the evidence is lacking or questionable, these assumptions provide an opportunity to look at history from a different angle. This alternative approach helps to understand how power uses image to create a mythology of its own greatness and infallibility. There is also a desire to understand the human side of Stalin's image, which is perceived as both a symbol of power and cruelty. The idea of doubles allows us to imagine the leader's inner contradictions, his vulnerability and fears, which are usually hidden from the public eye. As a result, myths become not only an element of political games, but also a reflection of collective fears and hopes. Thus, the theory of doubles is made up of many layers that combine historical facts, psychosocial processes, and cultural phenomena. The positive perception of such myths is sometimes associated with the desire to explain huge events and cataclysms within the framework of simple plots. This makes it easier to understand complex historical processes by offering clear reasons and culprits. People tend to believe in stories with happy endings or dramatic plot twists involving secret agents and intrigue. This approach forms a new form of narrative, where history becomes not just a chronicle of events, but a kind of detective story with unexpected twists and turns. In some societies, the tradition of oral storytelling contributes to the formation of enduring legends that over time become almost documentary facts. At the same time, each new storyteller adds their own touch, supplementing the details and enhancing the dramatic effect. This process of transformation makes the original story vivid and dynamic. That is why it is impossible to separate the official version from its numerous variations. Ultimately, myths take on a life of their own, influencing the perception of the past and the present. The psychological effect of confirmation serves as an additional factor in the stability of such theories. When a person finds elements that coincide with their expectations or beliefs, they tend to accept them without criticism. Social groups reinforce this effect by creating echo chambers where alternative opinions are perceived as enemies or misunderstandings. This widens the gap between different segments of society in their understanding of history and facts. In the case of Stalin and his doppelgangers, such sentiments fuel controversy and a desire to learn more and more new versions of the story. It is curious that intriguing stories about doppelgangers remain popular in the modern world, despite the availability of information. On the contrary, in an age of information abundance, the opposite effect occurs. An excess of data breeds doubt. People begin to look for simple explanations to complex questions, which makes conspiracy theories particularly appealing. The case of Stalin and questions about his possible replacements reflects these processes, showing how history and myth intertwine in an endless dance. For a long time, the topic of doppelgangers remained the privilege of a narrow circle of historians and researchers, but with the development of digital technology, it has become mainstream. Videos, podcasts, and articles on the subject garner millions of views and comments. People seek intriguing details, trying to look behind the scenes of official history. In this ever-changing information space, new legends and versions are created that hold the audience's attention and fuel interest in the mysteries of the past. The idea of doubles also has symbolic meaning. It is a kind of metaphor for the hidden forces and shadows that are always present beyond the visible world. In the case of Stalin's story, it may reflect the deep processes of power, where the personality changes, but the system remains. The idea that a public figure may hide several faces feeds our fears and expectations about how power works and who really controls events. Thus, myths about doppelgangers combine many elements, from the desire to expose secret plans to the aesthetic pleasure of mysteries and secrets. They become part of the mass consciousness, offering convenient and dramatic explanations for complex historical phenomena. It is important to remember that these stories do not arise out of thin air, but are fed by layers of culture, psychology, and history, giving us the opportunity to look at the fates of famous personalities from a different angle. Understanding these processes allows us to better navigate the flow of information and critically evaluate sources. Therefore, by studying the reasons for the persistence and popularity of doppelganger theories, we simultaneously reveal the secrets of human perception and the importance of responsibility when working with history. The following look at this topic will allow us to delve deeper into specific cases and documents, try to separate truth from fiction, and understand how such stories were formed and changed over time. In history, especially mysterious and not fully revealed, it is always easy to get confused between reality and fiction. That is why it is so important to remember that any story requires careful verification and a critical approach to sources. When examining the question of Stalin and his doubles, we encounter a multitude of versions, hypotheses, and mysteries that sometimes seem fantastical. However, a scientific approach, backed up by facts and evidence, makes it possible to separate the wheat from the chaff. Myths that the leader of the Soviet Union hid behind the masks of several people who were allegedly manipulated by influential circles have long attracted the attention of historians and conspiracy theorists. But it must be acknowledged that there is little evidence to support this, and what evidence there is often comes from opaque sources. It should not be forgotten that, in the context of brutal internal politics, Stalin's image was carefully controlled and created as a cult of personality, where every detail could be a tool of propaganda. Perhaps it was this atmospheric ambiguity that gave rise to the many legends about doppelgangers. It should also be understood that Stalin's world was not only a world of fear and cruelty, but also a world of cunning political games, where deception and staging were rife. But to claim that he was replaced in public by other people is to ignore the complex system of control and loyalty that he built up over the years. The whole story of the doubles is more a reflection of the desire to seek hidden causes and secret conspiracies, which was characteristic of the era. This penchant for mystification is very characteristic of people who try to explain the incomprehensible with the help of mysterious schemes. In addition, it should not be forgotten that during the years of numerous repressions, extreme secrecy was the norm. Even Stalin's close associates did not always fully understand the scale of what was happening. In such conditions, rumors about doppelgangers were perceived not simply as absurd, but as a possible version of events. In addition, a lot of fake news periodically appeared in the Soviet media, which only fueled the atmosphere of mistrust and gave rise to further speculation. So the story of the doppelgangers became a kind of mirror of a complex era. The lesson to be learned from this mystery is the importance of critical thinking when studying history. Facts must be separated from speculation, and sources must be carefully checked for authenticity. The leading role of the scientific method is not to take colorful stories or sensational discoveries at face value, but to construct a picture of the past based on evidence and logic. This helps to avoid mistakes and manipulation that can distort our perception of significant events and personalities. Understanding that myths about doppelgangers are the result of a complex interweaving of real facts and fictional stories helps us to take a fresh look at the political processes of the time. Stalin, as a large and controversial figure, provoked many interpretations. However, the key to understanding the era lies not in searching for mystical explanations, but in analyzing specific documents, conditions, and realities. This allows us to learn more about the system that created and sustained this cult, rather than the sensationalism surrounding one person. This approach helps to maintain respect for historical science and not succumb to the influence of popular but often unreliable theories. After all, any era, especially one as complex as Stalin's, is multifaceted and requires a balanced perception. The research that is most useful is that which does not simplify the picture and does not offer easy answers where there simply cannot be any. Then history becomes not a gloomy collection of rumors, but a living lesson for future generations. It is also important to remember the people who lived during this time. They were bearers of truth, but often lost in the horrors and politics of the day. Every voice, every testimony matters in restoring the truth. It is through the prism of these personal stories that it becomes possible to comprehend the scale and consequences of the Stalinist era, where any mystification only distracts from the real tragedies and feats. In conclusion, we must not forget that the story of the doubles is an indicator of how quickly the exploitation of fears and uncertainty leads to the creation of legends. It is up to us to lift the veil of mystery and face the truth. Many discoveries and reinterpretations await us, which will help us understand how complex and multi-layered was the time when the fates of millions were being decided. It is precisely this interdisciplinary approach that will allow us to come closer to a more objective understanding of the past. Moving on to further research, it is worth paying attention to the influence of these stories on the modern perception of power and personality in society. After all, the lessons of the Stalin era are important not only from a historical point of view, but also for analyzing modern mechanisms of governance and public trust. New perspectives and discoveries will help build a more transparent and responsible future, where myths and truth are clearly separated from each other. This is what we will discuss in the next part of our study.